is a way to help ensure that data is real, and they're using validated data with the blockchain. And with me is the CEO, Dylan Dewdney, to talk more about this. So great to see you again.
Yeah, really great to see you as well. And it's a pleasure to have this platform to talk.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about Kylin a few weeks ago. I mean, can you talk about the current situation? Maybe give us a little background, exactly what Kylin is doing, and then update us on what's been going on recently.
Yeah, so I'm going to put this in relatively dramatic terms where we believe that the internet has like a basic and traumatic wound in the sense that the original vision of the internet was it was supposed to be this sort of decentralized system where information is shared rather freely, that all of these nodes, if you will, in the beginning were relatively independent of one another. But what we have now is a picture where there are relatively few players that monopolize large parts of the internet. And that's, in a sense, it's totally cool. There's efficient systems that have cropped up around delivering certain services to people. But in our view, we kind of look at it, if anybody remembers the Matrix, where everybody is sort of like, hooked into those pods in this post-apocalyptic world. That's kind of, it's not far off from where we are. Obviously, we don't have things sticking into our heads and things like that, but really we've made this Faustian bargain of giving up a lot of our data, a lot of our information. And it's not always done in the most protected way, mind you, but nevertheless, we've given it up for the sort of, if you will, this bargain of having really neat software and things to interact with. And I'm not going to say that those things are bad, but I think that there are much more efficient ways of sorting this out in the long term, and much more not only efficient ways, but efficacious ways. Like, we need to unlock data, have data doing what we want it to do, have data, have an actualization that is above and beyond just being perhaps, although profit motive is important, above and beyond profit motives. So to do that, we feel that it's absolutely necessary to have some sort of a validated data layer that sits as an infrastructural component with the internet, so that we can know that information is true, and then thus we can start operating smart contracts with that data that we're pulling from the internet. And that's sort of the basic idea. And then getting a more efficient system running where people can ultimately get more value back to themselves. And also enterprises can get more value, share data, unlock data, operationalize data. These are all things that hopefully are in the cards.
Okay, so explain how Kylin does that. I mean, because I think we all, maybe 5 years ago, not everybody understood what Facebook does and how they make their money and so forth. I think a lot of people do now, but we keep using it. So how can Kylin help prevent that and help people get some value out of their own data?
Yeah, so in very like, I don't want to say simple terms, but just terms that are like easy to understand. We are not able as people on the internet to represent ourselves really well without a bot being able to do the same thing. So and just to flip that, a bot can do anything that a human can do, more or less, on the internet. That presents a variety of problems. So that's something that I think we're able to kind of solve in a way where when it comes to the data question, because data can also be repeated, it can be shared, and over and over and over again. What we do is we say, well, if you're going to report some data that is valuable, right? And you're willing to, if you're willing to report this data, you're willing to say there's some value underneath it too. So I call it like running through the field. Like, if anybody remembers trench warfare, I don't know, you run across no man's land, but maybe if no one's there on the other side to shoot you, you're still afraid to get shot, and you may put some armor on. For Kylin, and I apologize for the awkward analogies, for Kylin, that armor is the value that you would stake in KYL, which is the native token for Kylin and holds some ultimate value being traded out for, stable coin or BTC or ETH or, somewhere along the line fiat currency, you're saying, hey, I have all this value that's underneath this data that I'm reporting. Therefore, you should have a good sense that what I'm reporting is true. And this isn't just, so a lot of people may think of this like, well, anybody can report data, like what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal, because when you start doing things in blockchain, like operating smart contracts, for example, let's say that, an RESP smart contract, like you're putting a savings plan together, an educational savings plan, there's going to be some intermediaries that have some rent-seeking behavior on that as it exists now, right? But you could really just do that potentially in a smart contract. But the underlying information is very important that you report to that smart contract. For example, when my child turns 18, I will, all of this will be available to them to use for their schooling. We would need to have a very reliable way of reporting that information in order to engineer the automation of that smart contract.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the efficiencies that we envision with blockchain and smart contracts are literally impossible without a validated data layer in general terms, right? And that's really, that's the meat of it. And I apologize for my awkward analogies.
Yeah.
Sometimes on the spot.
Although I did recently watch The Matrix, so I was like, oh yeah, that is a little. So how do you think, because it feels like Facebook is so dominant and Google is so dominant. I mean, how do you break through and convince people and companies to use your product?
This will take time. But I do think, like in the most abstract terms, market efficiency and efficacy are the ways that these things break through. Efficiency in the sense that we can unlock revenue and value streams for individuals and businesses alike, and efficacy in the sense that we can get data to start doing what it's supposed to do. Like, where are the flying cars? Like, why is AI still kind of clunky? It's all because data is really, not all, but I don't want to be too reductive, but a lot of it has to do with how we're not yet sharing. Like, we haven't had a data renaissance in our species yet. And I really believe that that's kind of like the next step, because we don't have, this internet is great for us to share data, right? But we can't share it in a way we can't share it in a way that is efficient, because once we share the data, it's like it's gone, right? And if we can have a way to share data between people, between businesses, that is in some way remunerative, encrypted, then we can start to think about ways to really efficiently share data in things like data markets. I don't mind sharing parts of my data with you because I know I'm going to get like some money back from it, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be another rev gen line item in my business, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, efficiency and efficacy. And then in more grounded terms, I think, when the first people who start getting significant capital injections, or businesses from sharing things, that are perhaps somewhat proprietary to them. And for individuals, your proprietary information is how you move through the internet, what you buy, maybe even your genome, or to some extent indicators of your credit history. But once people start getting these significant capital injections from sharing that information, rather than companies like Facebook getting those significant capital injections, then that's like the first group of 1,000 people that are like, oh, I just got paid like $3,000 for sharing, through this app, my genome. And gee, I didn't know 23andMe, actually did, a $300 million year last year. And now that $300 million deal, is not going to the 23,000 people that they got the genomic information from, but it's going directly to those individuals.
Right. Yeah.
Those are the types of things that are possible. And I think those, like, when those stories start getting shared, that's when like things will probably
Yeah.
really
No, I
speed
agree.
up.
I think that's going to be an incentive. And yeah, it's almost like a dividend. Like, you're sharing, and so you get something back for your investment, which is your data instead of money. So D data. So that's a term I've heard you use. Explain that.
Okay, so we invented this term D-data because we felt that at least I think we invented it. There may be like a co-discoverer like Alfred Russel Wallace and the other. I always
Yeah.
forget the more well-known discoverer of evolution, Charles Darwin. Um, but there may be someone else who came up with it. I don't know. Um, but we came up with it because we wanted to really like kind of unconfuse or disambiguate this term oracle, which has become really a much more well-known term, but it's narrowly defined right now in the industry as price feeding services for DeFi and or for basically traditional financial instruments echoed in blockchain, which is sort of called DeFi. And they need reported price feeds of various assets to run different smart contracts. But we felt that D data is a much bigger concept, although we can run price feeds and things like that. D data is this much bigger concept of decentralized data economies, which we or global decentralized data economy, which we hope to help usher in with other great projects like Ocean Protocol, Oasis Labs, who are working on different aspects of the issue of D data. So we invented it because most people think of oracles, and that's the only thing they think of. It's kind of a narrow focus in crypto, but we wanted to really broaden the conversation and say, in fact, like decentralized data is really interesting because there are all these different use cases of pulling data from the internet or providing data that are above and beyond just price feeding for DeFi.
So we've seen, you mentioned crypto, we've seen Bitcoin cut in about half this year, at least in the past few months. Does that impact your business at all, or even just in a general way about interest in crypto in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has an impact in the broader market sentiment will always have an impact because we are very couched in, a lot of our community is very couched in, the crypto circles. But as time goes on, we're finding more and more people who are entirely new to crypto are coming to Kylin first because they're interested in this idea of, D data or trying to sort of, I guess, again, I go back to this idea of your proprietary information as an individual. It hits people on a very individual level that goes often above and beyond just interest in crypto or interest in the price of Bitcoin. So I think that I think that we're relatively cushioned or more cushioned than other projects from at least from our standpoint of building, from volatility. Obviously it's going to have effect on our token value or token price rather, like it does with the entire space.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dylan. Great to get an update, and
Yeah, my pleasure.
Look forward to the next one. It's always interesting to hear what you guys do, Kylin. So
I'll try to keep it interesting, and my pleasure. Absolutely. You're welcome.
Thank you.